Good evening, class. We left off with our last class, having looked at the first 500 years of church history. Numerous churches had been erected throughout the holy sites by Saint Helena. Another development in the first 500 years was that of monasticism. This continued after those first 500 years and continues into the present day. Monasticism is the devotion of one's life to prayer, work, study, and the needs of the community. While early monastics lived as hermits, Basil the Great developed a system of rules called the rules of life. It was by these rules of life the monk would vow to live, and generally included vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. These were called the evangelical councils. Monks also followed a daily routine revolving around community prayer, manual labor, contemplation, and service to those in need. Around 529 AD, Benedict of Nursia founded a monastery for monks at Monte Cassino, Italy. His sister, Scholastica, founded a similar monastery for nuns. Benedict's motto became Ora et Labora, pray and work. Locally, in the New Orleans area, we have St. Joseph's Abbey, which is a monastery. The monks of St. Joseph's Abbey produce a number of goods including soap, honey, works of art, burial caskets, and bread. The Abbey produces 2,000 loaves of bread each week and are distributed throughout the New Orleans metropolitan area. The Abbey also operates a seminary college to assist in the formation of those interested in the priesthood. While monks remained in the monastery, friars took the opposite approach. The word friar comes from the word frater, meaning brother. While monks were apart from the world, friars did their work in full view of the world. They would also depend completely on the generosity of others for their daily needs. Typically, they worked directly with the poor and would travel from town to town, preaching the gospel. Friars lived out Christ's words, to sell all that you have and distribute it to the poor. The two most well-known orders are the Franciscans and the Dominicans. Getting back to our history, Pope Saint Gregory the Great became Pope in the late 6th century. He evangelized pagan tribes and worked to promote their conversion. Gregory also contributed to canon law, the rules used to govern the church, or ecclesial governance. The a cappella music you sometimes hear at Mass, sung as a chant, bears Gregory's name and is called Gregorian chant. The next leader we'll take a look at was Charlemagne. Through the centuries, the Franks had gradually conquered all of what had been the western part of the Roman Empire. In Rome, on Christmas Day in the year 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne the leader of the Franks as the Holy Roman Emperor. Charlemagne worked to reorganize the hierarchy of the church. He also furthered education, decreeing that all monasteries open their classrooms to ordinary people, not just those studying to become monks and nuns. He also encouraged monastic libraries to preserve and to copy ancient manuscripts. By the year 1000 AD, most of what had previously been considered barbarian Europe had now been converted to Christianity. Now in the East, not all was well. Throughout the 7th and 8th centuries, Muslim armies invaded the Holy Land, North Africa, and Spain, where it would remain under Muslim rule for about 800 years. At the same time, a schism formed between the Eastern and Western churches, led by Rome and Constantinople. The Western Church is what we know today as the Roman Catholic Church, while the Eastern Church is composed of 22 Eastern churches in union with Rome. Those not in union with Rome are known as the Eastern Orthodox churches. At Mary Queen of Peace, we have a priest who is part of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, Monsignor William Belinsky. The Ukrainian Catholic Church is one of the 22 Eastern churches in union with Rome. Returning to our topic of Christian lands being invaded by Muslim forces, we must examine the ideology behind this invasion, which ultimately leads to the Crusades, a topic we'll cover next week in Chapter 10. The catalyst happens after the 1054 AD Schism, when Constantinople is invaded and the leader in the east petitions the Pope in the west for help. Muhammad united all Arabs under Allah. Muhammad taught the Ummah, which was a community of Muslim believers. Muhammad taught that people were either in the house of Islam, which was a Muslim believer, or in the house of war, a non-believer of Islam. It was the job and the vocation of those in the house of Islam to bring those who were in the house of war into the house of Islam, even if by force or by armed struggle, today's jihad. Now, today's understanding of jihad is presented as an interior spiritual Muslim struggle, but this understanding came much later. Muhammad dies in 632 AD. His last direction was, "Fight all men until there is no God but Allah." After his death, there's a Muslim conquest from 632 AD until the 8th century. Christian lands are overrun by Muslims in North Africa in 700 AD. In Spain, Portugal, and Israel, Jerusalem falls in 638 AD. Syria in 635 AD. The great city of Antioch in 637 AD. And Egypt in 642 AD. The Muslim Seljuk Turks attack the Byzantine Roman Empire in 1071 AD. The Byzantine Empire is captured in the Battle of Manzikert, located in Anatolia. This was a stronghold for food production and military recruitment. A few years afterwards, the emperor then writes a letter to Pope St. Gregory II asking for his help. His successor, Blessed Urban II, travels to Clermont, France, and he calls for the First Crusade. Pope Urban II knew that this would be a tough sell since the Eastern and Western Christians had just split in the Great Schism of 1054, whereby the Eastern churches ceased to recognize the authority of the Pope less than 20 years prior. So, rather than focusing on liberating Constantinople and the Byzantines, Pope Urban II focused the crusade on the liberation of Jerusalem from the Muslims. We will cover the Crusades and the Inquisition in much greater detail next week. Until then, class, have a great week. Thank you for your time tonight.